All right, you know him, you love him, you listen to him. He's OU softball play-by-play voice, Chris Plank. And speaking of listening to him, that's what I was doing earlier this morning on the Plank Show, live on the Ref. And I don't know, maybe I heard something wrong, but I thought that he mentioned something about a preseason mock lineup that he might have.
I do it every year.
I don't know if you want to share that here, but
no.
My interest.
Let's go for it. Now, this is based completely, Tyler, and thanks for having me, based completely on the end of fall and into, kind of what you hear from the preseason. So here's the way that it looks for Chris Plank right now. Hanson behind the plate. Sid Sanders at first. Tiara Jennings at second. Grace Lyons at short. Alyssa Brito at third.
Okay.
Jada Coleman in center. Riley Boone in right, and any combination of Alina Torres, Haley Lee, even Jordy Ball when she's not pitching out in left field. And I then think you'll have the DPs rotate that well too, that way too, with Torres or Lee or obviously Jocelyn Erickson. So that's where my mind is right now. Now I want to be clear. I haven't run this past Patrick Dunn yet. I haven't bugged Coach about it, but that's my heading into the season. Wouldn't be surprised if that's your starters come, I guess in less than 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Left field's a battleground once again. It was last year with Brito, who you now have playing third base, thought that could be the case at the end of last year. Of course, Mackenzie Donahue's out there. It's pretty set. I agree with all of them, but that left field could be interchangeable, man, after the second week.
Exactly. And listen, I just kind of rubber stamped Riley Boone in right field. I think that she's going to be fighting for playing time all year long. Here's the key, and we were talking with JT Gasso this morning. And of course, same place where you get the Diamond Envy podcast. You can find the podcast with JT. And he had talked about how he feels like every player improved, which is something that is kind of unique to him. And secondly, it could be a different player every single night. And that's kind of how I felt about it. You go back to even the Battle Series, and it was a different player every single game for both teams that you came away being like, whoa, now I know Sid Sanders won the overall championship, but, one night it's Haley Lee hitting 2 bombs, and one night it's Kinsey Hansen. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much what you're going to see in 23, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, we're talking about the position players, but it's also going to be fun to see what happens in the circle, right? Now, sure. I'm going to guess that, Jordy Ball and Storako, probably your 1-2, but they seem as deep as maybe they've ever been in the circle. Like, how do you think that that's going to work out in the first, 2-3 months of the season?
Yeah, I think that, you've got a true rotation and you've got a lot of matchups, Tyler, that you can have. In other words, Coach and Coach is a big Dodgers fan. I'm a big Dodgers fan too. And she likes, I think, seeing what Dave Roberts has done with not just, and if you want to say it's the GM Dodger fans that get mad, but just to have guys that can do a little bit of and gals that can do a little bit of everything. And that's not just in the lineup. And again, going back to the previous conversation, Brito back on the infield, Torres able to do a little bit of everything if necessary. I think that's the same thing now with pitching, to where something pretty unique to softball, you can have matchups, right? You can have Kirsten Deal's going to be our, in conference play. She might start a game, but if it comes down to a big moment where it's a lefty hitter and we need to get an out, Kirsten Deal's our go-to. And if she might pitch to one batter, might pitch to 2. But that's going to be her job. And I use that as an example because there are so many possibilities, right? And it's, again, still somewhat new, I think, to the sport. You don't get a lot of pitchers coming in like you do in the bigs for, I think, what's the rule now, Tyler? You have to at least pitch to, 6 hitters or whatever it is in baseball, because it had become so specialized. Now with, these bigger rosters, you can afford to maybe burn a pitcher like that with the depth of your staff. So I'm here for it, man. And I think it's going to be Jordy Ball as the ace again this year. But I tell you what, Nicole May has had a whale of an offseason, and she's healthy, so I'm excited to see her. and obviously hoping Stracco can get back to 100% after the fall too.
Yeah, a couple of episodes ago, it's kind of going down the top 100 players list on D1 softball. Some players that I think are going to be ranked higher at the end of the year. It was a hot take, but not really that hot of a take because everyone thinks Kinsey Hansen's going to be good. Of course, Kinsey Hansen's going to be good. It'd be a surprise if she wasn't on the All Big 12 list at the end of the year. But my take is that I think at the end of the season, and I think she was outside the top 10 in this ranking, I think that she might be viewed as the best catcher in softball. She's had really good seasons before, but it's her health. Like, there's just so many things are pointing to believe that she's going to be maybe not just one of the best catchers, maybe one of the best hitters in all of college softball this year. I'm kind of feeling a huge year from Kinsey. Not Jocelyn Olo, not that, but she has a massive year.
So almost perfect timing for and for those that aren't familiar, Tyler and I work together at the Ref, but they also publish a monthly magazine called Boy Street, and then there's a more edition called 19th Street. It's fantastic. Free piece that you can get anywhere around town in Norman. And I wrote about Kinsey Hansen. And that was what you're laying out was my reason and the reasoning why I pitched the story. And then when we talked to Coach Gasso about her, she brought up there's times in every great player's career at Oklahoma where they've hit a dip, whether it's injuries, playing a sport where you fail more times than you succeed, whatever it is. And, go back to Lauren Chamberlain. She battled injuries. I think it was her sophomore year. Same for Jocelyn Alo. What they did that next year was legendary, right? They always bounce back in a big way. So Kinsey Hansen is that kind of player. She's the kind of person that when you and I are doing this show 15 years from now, we can say, man, Kinsey Hansen, one of the greatest of all time. That's the potential, and that's how good she is. So, yeah, I'm with you. She's a great catcher. She's smart with pitchers and obviously really, really good arm. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think she can be, if not the best, like right up there as we approach World Series time this year.
I'm going to ask you the exact same question you asked JT Gasso about 3 hours ago.
Okay.
And his response was epic. You already talked about it. He's like, I've never seen every single player, get better like this before. It's awesome. Who's kind of your surprise under the radar player going into the year?
I think if you say Jocelyn Erickson, that's not really under the radar because she's been talked about so much. God, I want to say Haley Lee, but there's someone else that has been talked about quite a bit.
There's 10 top 100 players. It's hard to pick anyone.
Right. I mean, I think Hannah Core, if she can get her bat going.
Yeah.
Hannah Core, defensively, Tyler, your best defensive outfield for Oklahoma, in my mind, is Core in left, Coleman in center, Boone in right. And it might be among the best defensive outfields in all of softball. But for Hannah, she's got to hit. All right, I'll give you one. Quincy Lilio.
Okay, perfect.
That's an under the radar pick. She's not talked about a lot. I think she's going to be in the mix for some DPing. She can hit with power. She was one of the top recruits in the country, as are all of these student athletes. And I think she's got a chance to have a really good season. Now, it's tough to break that lineup, right? But let's say maybe you have some games where Tiare plays some short. Maybe Quincy plays some second. Maybe you see her some at third. I don't really know. I think it's either going to be Brito or Torres there. But that would be my under-the-radar pick. I really think she's got a chance, Tyler, to have a really big year.
It's a good year to have OU softball season tickets. One, they're going to be really good, but the home schedules is maybe as good as it's ever been. Oklahoma State, they got a real chance to have maybe Kenny Gajewski's best team, but this non-conference schedule is loaded, man. And it's like a really good opening weekend of college football where OU is bam, like there's some elite teams that they face. Where would this rank for you in terms of toughest non-conference schedules you've seen this program play in terms of like the preseason rankings?
I understand that there's many more well-versed fans at this, that can go back to the late 90s and some of all the trips out to Arizona and the early 2000s. But this is the most difficult and the best non-conference schedule that I've seen Oklahoma have. I mean, in fact, I would almost use the term epic. Yeah. It appears in years past, in trying to schedule up as much as they can, it became a challenge because, some of these classics, these tournaments, these preseasons just didn't provide some of the matchups for Oklahoma that you needed. And again, you can't help it when teams are down, but you add in a trip to Baton Rouge, Florida State coming here for a midweek. You're not messing around even. You've got to go to Starkville to play in the Classic. You've got an incredible lineup of teams with the Mary Nutter. Obviously, out of the Mark Campbell, you're opening up with Duke. I mean, it's as impressive as I've seen. And then, for a 7-team league in softball, Tyler, of those 7 teams, I mean, we're looking right now at, 3 locks and maybe a 4th or a 5th knocking on the door of the tournament. And I'm with you. I really like what Kenny Gajewski has this year. I think they're going to struggle early on like last year because of their schedule. But, I mean, you're facing 3 of the final 4 teams in this conference from the World Series last year. So, yeah, this is, for me in my first year with 16, this is as difficult of a non-conference schedule as I can ever remember. And maybe as good as the Big 12 has been since it got kind of capped down to 7 teams.
Yeah, and the top 6 is really good coming into this year, man. I'm really keeping an eye on UCLA. You mentioned Oklahoma State, but Florida State and Florida are going to be good. You know what you got with Alabama, with Montana Fouts. But I think UCLA is a team that's really going to improve throughout the year. And once it's time to play for a national championship, I feel like they're going to be pretty good. With that,
I think that's the championship series right now.
I'd agree. Yeah, I think that too. How big is the gap, do you think, exists right now between OU and the rest of the field? Do you think it's pretty small? You think it's pretty wide? What does that look like to you?
Well, I personally think it's pretty wide, but it can easily be diminished with injuries. I mean, Oklahoma won the national championship last year without its best pitcher. I mean, I don't know how many other teams would be able to lose their ace and still make a run even to the semifinals, right? Even to, I mean, you go into the postseason and you've lost your number 1. I mean, holy smokes, what are you going to do? But as you've said with UCLA, man, they have recruited and they are good. So I would say between Oklahoma and UCLA, it's fairly tight. Oklahoma's, I know that you like to talk about it. You know me, I'm a little bit paranoid talking undefeated. Oklahoma's going to lose some games. They'll lose,
and that's fine. That's okay.
And I'm okay with that, as long as it's not in June at the World Series. But I think there are also some teams like Florida State. I'm not as big on Florida State as some are right now, but Florida State gets hot. If Oklahoma gets beat by them, well, there you go. That's a tough one to try to bounce back from. But still, that's a team that has a talent that can beat Oklahoma. Now, can they beat them in a best-of-3 series? No. But can they beat them on any given night? You bet. And there's a lot of teams in that group, right? Oklahoma State, Texas, UCLA. I'm not as I don't know. We'll see how things kind of develop in the SEC. And I know that you had Gray on last week, and he's awesome.
Yeah, he is.
I need to see the rejuvenated Montana Fouts to throw Alabama in there right now, but I'm not against it. So, yeah, I'm not trying to come from this like, oh, it's big bad Oklahoma and bleep everyone, but the proof is kind of in what they've accomplished and what they have coming back. I mean, how many times has anyone lost the best hitter in the history of college softball? And when they come back, you say, wow, their offense, it might be better. How is that possible?
I had the title of the podcast 2 weeks ago was OU's going to replace the best player with the best player, with T.R.A. Jennings being the best player coming back this year, according to Duke softball. And I agree. So it's crazy, man.
Hey, can I add one more thing on T.R.A. too?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen someone more comfortable in the spotlight than T.R.A. And I think a lot of that has to do with how she was raised, the kind of family that she has. I mean, obviously she gets great coaching, and this Oklahoma family has put their arms around her, and she's a rock star. Well, let me tell you something. That family, that Jennings family, Tyler, they're special, man. And, the way that they brought up T.R.A. and the way that, she's grown into the player that she is. I mean, she's somebody that, I just almost feel like is destined to have a C on their chest next year. And she is comfortable with it. Now, she's going to hit skids. She's going to have tough spots, but I just – they talk about people that are cut from a different cloth, right? And it's like that person's special. That to me is, you have two people that really jump out to me on that, and they're both around for a couple more years in Jennings and Coleman. So it's pretty special having that 1-2 punch going forward.
Well, that's what's one of the many great things about college softball is it just has such an intimate feel to it. Is you felt like you knew Jossie's parents, especially her
Yeah,
dad, right?
exactly.
You're saying
Exactly.
the same thing about Tiare's family. I mean, you're going to get to know them a lot more this year. You had a broadcast last year where I asked you the next Monday, who is that? Who is that yelling so loud? You're like, oh, that's Uncle Mike. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Jada's uncle.
Jada's uncle.
That's Uncle Mike. You know who Uncle Mike is now. So it's just one of the cool things. You get to learn these kids, but you get to learn about their families as well.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. It's really cool. One final question before I get you out of here. Now, in the industry, we call this inside baseball.
I like
Obviously, it's inside softball on this podcast. So early on in the season, when it's a player, maybe she's struggling early on, or not necessarily struggling, but trying to get in the flow of things. It's early on in the season. Does that exist for you as a broadcaster? Like, do you just go bam after an off season into game one and you're just as good as you were last year, or does it take a few games for you to get back in the flow?
Last year I thought was surprisingly smooth. I think being on the road helped it out, but every year there's a few moments, I'll just say this. Oklahoma has some girls that when it comes off their bat, every time you're like, oh my gosh, that is gone. And it'll end up, it's just a one hopper off the just a one hopper off the fence. So yeah, and it's also, you know what? It's learning the team still. I mean, we could sit here and I could talk about everyone's hometown and we could talk about their family, but you want to see where they've improved, right? And Tyler, I have a lot of new faces to learn around this team, not just in the 8 newcomers for Oklahoma, but, and it's a little help. The volunteer assistant is Hope Troutwine, but they brought in, a new analytics person. There is another new grad assistant. There's a new equipment manager this year for them. But, thankfully we have 2 consistents there in one of the greatest strength coaches that everyone will be hearing about soon in Dane Summer. And their athletic trainer, who is among the best that you could ever have for this sport. She gets it. She's awesome. But yeah, a lot of new outside of Dane and Mara Kennedy for the Sooners. So I'm pumped to get things going. Sooner Nation, hang with me. I'm sure it'll be a struggle through the first game, but if we're not in a groove, Tyler, by the 10th game of the season, then I'll really be concerned about things. I might be getting too old.
Good stuff. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me, dude. Sorry for the snotting.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Oh. He just logs off. End broadcast.